Lesson 4.3 Feature Writing Reporting and Finding Sources. This is the beating heart of journalism. This is the thing that makes a journalist a journalist. At the end of the day, you don't have to be a great writer to be a great journalist, but you do have to be a great reporter. It's also the most challenging part for new journalists, especially student journalists. It involves getting out of your comfort zone, leaving the safety of your desk or your friend group, and actually interacting with people who you probably don't know, at least not well. Bobby Hawthorne says it this way in his book Radical Right. Reporting is hard work. You have to get up out of your chair, interview people you might not otherwise talk to, go places you'd rather not go, spend time watching and listening to something other than what's on your phone or TV. It takes time and effort, and in many cases, no small amount of courage. The reason this is so important, and it's at the heart of everything we do, is because feature articles are made up of quotes from various sources. As journalists, we don't put our opinion in. We simply tell the story by directly quoting people who were close to the story, who the events happened to. We write a little bit at the beginning and a few sentences in between to fill in facts and information, but the story as a whole that we write is mostly made up of the things that people told us in an interview. So you can't write important, interesting stories without convincing the people you interview to tell you important, interesting things. This is the art of reporting. Getting people that you may not know to tell you important, interesting things is a challenge, but there are tips and tricks to help you get exactly what you need. First, you have to interview the right people. In journalism, we call the people you choose to interview your sources. And generally, we don't publish a story that doesn't have at least 3 sources. And we don't want to interview people simply for their opinion on the topic who aren't really personally invested or connected to the topic. We want to interview sources who are closest to the story. We find the people most involved or most affected by what or who we are writing about, and those are our sources. We also find people who have some sort of expertise or special knowledge that a random person wouldn't necessarily have. For example, if you're writing a story about dropping out of school, you'd want to interview maybe someone who was considering dropping out. And then maybe you'd find someone or you knew someone who had actually dropped out that you could get into contact with. Other sources close to the story might be those people's family members or really close friends, and maybe even a guidance counselor who knows the statistics and risks associated with dropping out. You wouldn't interview the random friend in your math class who happens to have an opinion about it. For most stories, you won't often know who all the people closest to the story are before you begin. You may only know one, and you might have to ask them for suggestions about who else you can talk to that know about what's going on or about their situation. You might have to ask that person to give you contact information for the news source and make contact with them out of the blue. Whatever the case may be, you need to interview at least 3 sources for any article you write for our publications. And being a journalist and reporter means you need to determine who those sources are and contact them. Once you know who you're going to interview, you need to do your research so they know you mean business and will trust you're serious enough about what you're doing that they should give you real, thoughtful answers. You should never ask a question that you could have found the answer to yourself if you would have done a little research or Googled it. For example, if you were to interview an administrator, you could easily find out information about their roles and responsibilities on campus by looking at the school's website before. This is information you should already know before you speak to them. Or if you were interviewing a student athlete, you should already know what position they play and maybe some stats on their performance so far this season. You could access this information on sites like Max Preps or from the school's Huddle account if the coaching staff grants you access. With the information you get from researching beforehand, you can show your source that you have done some work and you have some knowledge, which makes you more trustworthy and makes them more comfortable sharing their thoughts with you, which will make your article better. Once you know what sources you want to interview and you've done what research you can on the topic or the individual themselves, you're ready to set up an interview. We'll cover that in the next lesson.